I think I asked her that once. So we did have mentors. Early in the 60s, the GRA, so Girls Recreation Association, that's what my sister and what many of you probably remember, that you had after school activities, but they didn't get to play competition. They didn't get to travel. They had no uniforms. They took them all away in the 40s. So really our foundations of where we are today are those girls who became women, who became leaders that asked, we want more. The we want more were the Dorothy McIntyres, the Diane Nickonens, the Steph Sadiks, and more about those three individuals in a bit. In 1965, the Minnesota Association of Health, Physical Education, and Recreation, so us as educators, so myself and Scott Nelson, who we belong to become educators, they recommended in 1965 to bring athletics back. The landslide was beginning with the hiring of Dorothy McIntyre pretty much right out of high school. Many of us that went to state tournaments in the 70s and the 80s will remember this phrase, and this was her. After the announcements of the players, she'd always say, okay girls, let's play volleyball, or let's play basketball. Dorothy to this day is an advocate for women's sports. Her voice was commanding and direct, and I can only imagine her fighting for us sitting around a table full of men. In 1968, Dorothy demanded a vote, or asked for a vote, for the Minnesota State High School League to start offering athletics. All men at the table. How many votes of yes do you think she got? Dorothy managed to get 32 votes of yes and no no's. Dorothy was a mover and shaker, and she had to have found a way to get them all to realize how important it was. Mind you, this was before Title IX. So Title IX required us to be at the table. So what year was Title IX? 1972. I would not be here without Title IX. Many of my colleagues, many of my teammates here would not be here and been part of sports. Remember, however, it wasn't just about sports. Title IX was about many different financial opportunities for many other disadvantaged groups. It also was not the end of boys' sports, as many thought. None of us wanted others to lose opportunities just for us to gain. So what year was the first girls competition sport program in Kenyon? Does anybody know? Scott? Close. So class of 73, school year of 72-73. 50 years to now. So how great timing for the dedication. We added girls in basketball and track. Kenyon wasted no time in adding the sports. The high school league was not official yet. For the most part, they only played 3 to 8 games, but they didn't play anybody, they didn't have any playoffs. So our first head coach was hired in 1973, and who was that?
Nickenen.
Diane Nickonen. That little Finn of 5 foot, Spitfire, hired from Tower, Minnesota, became our mentors as us women in the 70s, in the 80s, and the 90s. She was hired to coach basketball and track. There was no volleyball yet. What season did basketball play in that first year? It played in the fall. I learned that in doing the history for this. That was interesting. So basketball for the first 2 years was actually a fall sport. In the class of 74, so school year of 73-74, the first official year Kenyon joined the Minnesota State High School year that year. There was actually 2 state basketball tournaments, one in the fall and one in the winter, because different schools played at different times. Class of 1975, so school year 74, 75, they added volleyball, and volleyball was a winter sport. Who joined our staff to coach basketball then?
Sadek.
Many of you don't know her. She was only here about 3 years. She was another little blonde, feisty gal named Steph Sadek. Steph happened to be my homeroom teacher. Paula Nessett, my cousin, and I got in many troubles as 7th and 8th graders in her homeroom. Steph has remained a good friend over the years, and that's how much leadership matters to young girls. Nikki moved to basketball and moved to volleyball and track. And then in the fall of 74, we won our first trophy in basketball. It was a heartbreaking loss against Goodhue by 1 point. They weren't even expected to be close. What year was the first girls' state volleyball entrance? I don't see anybody here from that team.